As the 1540s progressed, Elizabeth Tudor remained a royal child without clear status. Though she had been declared illegitimate, she was still acknowledged by her father Henry VIII. The birth of Prince Edward in 1537 shifted the focus of the Tudor succession firmly onto the male line, and both Mary and Elizabeth became secondary figures, politically relevant but not prioritized. However, Henry VIII's views on succession evolved. In 1543, he passed the Third Succession Act, which restored both Mary and Elizabeth to the line of succession, though their legitimacy was never officially reinstated. This act meant that if Edward died without heirs, Mary would follow, and after her, Elizabeth. By the time of his death in January 1547, Elizabeth was 13 years old. When Henry died, Edward VI ascended the throne at just 9 years old. Because of his age, a regency was established to govern on his behalf, first under his uncle Edward Seymour, the Duke of Somerset, and later under John Dudley, the Duke of Northumberland. The young king was a committed Protestant, having been raised in the Reformed religion. Under his reign, the Church of England moved further away from Catholicism, and Protestant reforms deepened throughout the country. Elizabeth's education and worldview aligned well with Edward's Protestant regime. She continued her studies during this time and remained largely out of political controversy. During Edward's reign, she often stayed at her own estates, including Hatfield House and Ashridge. She corresponded regularly with influential figures and kept a respectful relationship with her half-brother. She presented herself as modest and obedient, a contrast to the volatile court intrigues of the Regency government. A significant moment occurred in 1549 with the downfall of Edward Seymour, the Lord Protector. Though Elizabeth was not involved in the factional disputes that brought about his fall, the instability within the Regency Council reminded her of the dangers of court politics. As Edward's health began to deteriorate in the early 1550s, a new succession crisis emerged. The Duke of Northumberland, who had by then gained control of the Regency, sought to prevent the Catholic Mary from taking the throne. In 1553, Northumberland persuaded Edward to name Lady Jane Grey, his Protestant cousin, as his heir, bypassing both Mary and Elizabeth. This plan, however, was short-lived. When Edward died in July 1553, Jane was declared queen, but lasted only 9 days before Mary, supported by the people and the nobility, claimed her rightful place as queen. Elizabeth was at her estate in Hertfordshire when Mary took the throne. She acted quickly and carefully. She congratulated her sister and travelled to London to pay her respects. Publicly, Elizabeth embraced Mary's authority, showing humility and obedience. Privately, however, their relationship was strained. Mary was a devout Catholic and viewed her younger half-sister with suspicion. Elizabeth's Protestant beliefs, coupled with her popularity and potential claim to the throne, made her a dangerous figure in Mary's eyes. Tensions escalated in 1554 when a rebellion known as the Wyatt's Rebellion broke out. Led by Sir Thomas Wyatt, the uprising was a response to Mary's planned marriage to Philip II of Spain, a match feared by many as a move towards Spanish and Catholic domination. Although there was no concrete evidence that Elizabeth had supported the rebellion, she was suspected by Mary's advisors, particularly Bishop Stephen Gardiner and others at court. Elizabeth was arrested and taken to the Tower of London, the very place where her mother had been executed nearly 2 decades earlier. She arrived at the Tower on March 18, 1554, under heavy guard. Though terrified, Elizabeth maintained her composure. She denied all involvement in the rebellion and insisted on her innocence. Despite pressure to sign a confession, she refused to incriminate herself. After weeks of interrogation and no clear evidence against her, she was eventually released from the Tower and placed under house arrest at Woodstock. Mary, meanwhile, faced growing unrest and failed to produce an heir. Her marriage to Philip II brought no popularity, and the return to Catholicism, along with the Marian persecutions, further damaged her reputation. As time passed, Mary's health declined. Elizabeth, still under house arrest, was gradually allowed more freedom but remained careful. She never publicly challenged her sister's authority and avoided open involvement with court factions. By 1558, Mary's condition had worsened, and it was clear she would not produce an heir. Elizabeth was summoned to court. When Mary died on November 17, 1558, the crown passed to Elizabeth. At 25 years old, she was proclaimed Queen of England, receiving the crown that had once seemed completely out of reach.